Hi, my name is Lenny Hall. I'm a wood floor contractor from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I'm also a regional instructor for the National Wood Flooring Association. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to run a buffer across the floor to leave the floor as scratchless as possible, and that is a term we call motor in front of the stick, or clocking the buffer. I'll go through processes of how to sand at the perimeter, how to sand in the field, and show you visual aids on what the sander is actually doing to the floor underneath. I've stopped my buffing process, which is the first step in buffing a floor, and that is to go around the perimeter of the room. Where an operator wants to start is at the upper right corner, and in my case, it was the corner over here by the door. It's the upper right corner relative to the floor direction for a wood plank floor. What I have under the machine now is a visual aid to understand why it is that I go around the wall lines first in a backwards motion with the buffer. And it's all about how much pressure the machine is exerting the mineral against the floor and where it's taking the scratches out from your previous edger work. So I'm going to uncover the visual aid right now. So as you see, this is the descriptive visual aid that I have under the floor, and it's showing the gradient of pressure that the sandpaper has against the floor. The highest pressure point on most every orbital buffing machine, whether it be a full plate like this one or a multi-head, the pressure points are generally located between the motor and the handle and a little bit to the right of the operator. Here I've described the pressure points as going from 5, which is the highest pressure point, to 1, which is a lightweight polishing point. What I want to do is to get my highest pressure against the wall line, and to do that I have to operate with my right shoulder and the right handle as close to and against the wall as possible while going backwards. So you have the high pressure point sanding hard first, and as the machine moves across the floor, on this point under my finger, you can see what happens is that the pressure gets lighter and lighter and lighter until the machine passes over that spot and it polished out all my hard scratches in the floor. We're currently buffing the middle of the room. We've already done our perimeters, and in doing the middle of the room, we're going to do a process that we call in the industry motor in front of the stick. I'm going to get down by the motor side and show you what's happening under the machine. I removed the buffer from the floor. With my visual aids underneath it now exposed, we're going to see visually how the sandpaper is working on against the floor and how you use this knowledge to your advantage on polishing a floor with a buffer and leaving no scratch pattern behind. In this configuration, my visual aid is showing the handle at approximately 45-degree angle to the path of the wood floor, and I'm moving from my right side to my left side across the room. So I'm going in that direction, which means that I'm leading with my polish side and I'm trailing with my high pressure side. This allows me to cut across the floor aggressively, which would remove any drum sanding edge marks or any kind of stop marks in the floor over a wide space. The key is when I return from the left side, I don't advance into the room. I literally rotate the motor around the same pathway and I come back tracking over my previous path without dropping into the room. And what that does is this. I rotated my buffer now where my handle is 45 degrees to the wood floor in the opposite direction, covering the same path I came across. Previously, my high pressure point was over here. Now rotated around, it's in line with the wood grain, which means I'm not cross-scratching the floor here, and indeed all of this other area, which is lighter and lighter pressure, is polishing out my cross-grain scratches. My key is to advance through the room only from the right-hand side. So as I come back from left to right, once I get the wall line, I'm going to rotate the buffer at the wall line, and I'm going to rotate down about 3 inches. And this will help put my high pressure zone at cross scratching again, and I'm going to advance through the room to the left. Now all of this though is polishing all the work up here. I reach the left side of the wall, I'm going to rotate again without advancing into the room and bring my high pressure point in line with the wood grain, polishing out my heavy cross scratches up here. And I repeat that on the right side of the wall. My handy phrase for that is right and left is wrong. Right is where you want to advance through the room. On the left side, you want to just return on the same path. If you can repeat that path about every 3 inches or so throughout the room, what you'll do is cover the same part of the floor 5 to 6 times, and each time you do so, it polishes lighter, lighter, and lighter, removing all your previous scratches. I'm going to expand my visual aids to show what that looks like. In this configuration, you can see the successive passes I'm advancing through the room when I drop down on the right, returning back on the same path from the left. If this was my high pressure point on my very first pass of this series, you can see every successive pressure point moves into the room and advancing from the right side. On the return of the left side, this pressure point of 5 is being polished by 4, by 3, by 2, and then eventually by 1. That means that the same place on the floor has been polished 5 times with lighter and lighter pressure against the sandpaper. That's what takes out all the swirl marks. The general mistake I see the industry doing is using half the disc of sandpaper to advance through the room and doing it from both sides of the room. Just advancing by half a disc of paper, you can see what is happening here as I lay the visual aid down, in that the high pressure zone here gets polished one time by the second pass, but by the time you make the third pass, there's no polishing effort, and you don't have enough time of all this lighter pressure zone to work over the floor and erase any scratches you have remaining behind. One of the neat things about my visual aid is that it also allows you to understand why it is that people learn how to operate a sander without knowing what's happening. And that is, when you raise the handle to the right, the machine moves to the right. When you lower the handle, the machine moves to the left. In this case, you can see what's happening is that as the mineral is spinning around underneath the machine, you have a lot of pressure on this one side of the machine, and you have less and less pressure here, but there's a lot more area. So when I have this in neutral, this area is in complete balance with all of this surface area. If I push my handle down, which is lowering, I put more pressure in this 5 zone, and it forces the machine to move to the left. If I raise my handle, you see that I weaken the 5 zone, and I put more pressure on the lighter side, which will force the machine to move to the right. That's where you get raised right and lower left. What not to do with the buffer is to heal the buffer. And that is to have the operator input on the buffer in an excessive fashion. For instance, taking your body weight and pushing down on the buffer on the disc while you're trying to sand in order to take out a drum score, a low board, or some other mark of sanding in the floor. That's really counterproductive because you're really forcing the mineral into the wood, causing a lot of scratches to happen. Another thing you don't want to do is change paper, even of the same grit, in the middle of a room. You want to plan so that if you have paper to be changed in a large room, say, that you start at one wall line, work your way towards the middle of the room, then change your paper, but you're going to change the paper from the used one to the new one, and you're going to start on the opposite wall, working away and marrying the same used paper into the center. That way you won't have a color differential if you're doing stain, or you won't have a shine difference when you're talking about a more worn in slick side compared to a very rough cut new side. As you see, running a buffer is more than just turning a switch on and going. You have to think about what the buffer is doing to your floor and use that to your advantage to be able to operate the buffer cleanly, without scratches, and making your work easier for yourself. I hope you guys found this video helpful, and I'll see you around.